All right. Okay. So yeah, we're live. I am so sorry. We had some technical difficulties. Literally, when I started this live, it crashed and I lost every body that was actually on the show. But they all came back. Well, except one. So we're waiting on one more person to come back. And but we're gonna go ahead and start, and he can come in as soon as he gets back in. I wanted to have a conversation tonight about a topic that's very, very important to me. I kind of started getting interested in politics because of an experience that I had when I was like in my early 20s. The economy had just crashed, and I was a music student working for the Washington Performing Arts Society. And I needed to find something to kind of retrain myself and start a new career. One of my friends suggested a program, and she was like, you know, we're doing something with this school called Maya Angelou Public Schools, but we're starting something in a juvenile detention center. And so I was just like, okay, I really didn't know what I was getting into. And we were sent away to this freedom school training in, it was like Knoxville, Kentucky, for a week. And it freaking changed my whole life. I mean, I didn't even realize how much of how the effect that it would have on my life. I mean, I just wanted to be a famous singer. And all of a sudden, I just had this change of heart where I want to try to change the world. So going through all of that, I ended up going down this whole path of politics and everything. And so I just want to kind of have this conversation about this. And I have some great panelists that are going to discuss this issue with me. I think that it's very important. I've had quite a few conversations about education, but a lot of times when we're talking about education, we are not talking about the juvenile justice system because they are a part of the young people that are being educated. And so I just have a couple of facts that I'm going to bring to focus. Kids from poor neighborhoods who are at high risk of becoming involved in dangerous situations, more often African-American, Native American, and Hispanic teens, usually make up the majority of the populations of the juvenile justice system, okay? African-Americans being number one, Native Americans being number two, and Hispanics being number three, all right? So much of the discussion about educational reform centers on standards and assessments in public schools. Juvenile correctional facilities in the U.S. usually lack qualified reading and math teachers or resources. Teachers in juvenile correctional facilities usually aren't focusing on same curriculum as the public schools. This leaves the kids who are going to come out further behind. That's another area that needs to be looked at because effective instruction has to be within the context of the same curriculum as other students in the same grade. Juvenile correctional facilities usually have no basic school curriculum or mental health and behavioral supports for adolescents. Many of the young people with mental health issues end up in juvenile facilities, a track similar to the school to prison pipeline many students in public schools fall into, okay? So I'm going to introduce my panel, and we're going to kind of talk about some of these issues. The first person that I want to bring up to introduce to you all is one of my really good friends, and she's the reason why we're actually doing this panel. Her name is Brittany Lee-Bey, all right? Brittany is a reading specialist in DC. She's been teaching for 14 years and currently teaches middle school, which is now her favorite. Additionally, Brittany runs Etymology Rules, an education brand that seeks to equip people worldwide with the knowledge and power of words. She has a book that is scheduled to be released early next year. Brittany loves words and teaching word study. Follow her on Instagram, Twitter, and etc. All right. The next person I want to introduce is the person who was actually leading and managing this whole Maya Angelou Public Schools. He was the executive director of that organization during the time that I was participating in Maya Angelou Public Schools, okay? And his name is David Domenici, all right? David serves as the executive director of Breaking Free. He co-founded and served as the executive director of the Maya Angelou Public Schools, a network of alternative schools in Washington, D.C. He served as a founding principal of Maya Angelou Academy, the school located inside DC's long-term secure juvenile facility from 2007 to 2011. He designed the key elements of the school model, including short, thematic units aligned with state standards, incentive programming based on the positive behavioral intervention and support framework, a technology-enhanced instruction and learning platform, and a set of technology tools designed to enhance the communication between school and correctional staff. David is a graduate of the University of Virginia and Stanford Law School. He is the co-author, along with James Foreman Jr., of 2 articles about school reform. First, What It Takes to Transform a School Inside a Juvenile Facility, the story of Maya Angelou Academy, and highlights lessons learned during the startup of the first year of the Maya Angelou Academy. The second, A Circle of Trust, chronicles the first year of the Maya Angelou Public Charter School. Okay. The last person right now that I want to introduce is one of my really, really, really good friends. I met him while I was out in Ohio through another friend, and he's been a great, great mentor and friend. We've kind of been having a lot of conversations around politics and education along the years. So I'm really, really proud to have him come on. I tried to invite him before, but it was difficult trying to get our schedules connected. But now he's on, and I'm so glad to see that he's here. This is Mr. Wendall C. Garth. He is the principal of Invictus High School, West Camp, where he works with students from ages 16 to 21. He has a background of being an educator in correctional facilities in the greater Cleveland area. He currently is completing a doctoral program at Morgan State University and is vice president of the Maple Heights City School Board. All right. So I'm going to bring everybody else in. We also have somebody else that's supposed to be on the stream with us. So hopefully he'll be able to come back in. I mean, we kind of lost him when we crashed, when the system crashed, but hopefully he'll be back soon. All right. So I just want to kind of toss out what is, and just kind of describing what has been your experience working around in these spaces around the juvenile justice system, and what things have you seen doing your work. Okay. And we will start with David.
All right. Let's see. Well, I've been doing this for a long time. As you mentioned, I started and then spent 4+ years getting the Maya Angelou Academy started in DC's youth correctional facility. After doing that, we started this separate organization now called Break Free Education, and we work to improve schools and youth facilities around the country, using a lot of the models and values that we learned along the way at Maya. And it was great having you guys, great seeing you all here on the show. So let's see, what if I could just, I'll mention a couple things and we can circle back around. I think one of the real issues here that sometimes gets lost is there's a lot of reasons why schools and youth facilities are not good. The primary reason why schools and youth facilities are either not good or good is because the people inside of the facilities, in the instruction, both in the education side and the secure care side, have choices to make. When the adults inside of the building fully value the young people in their care, value them as fully human, and make a decision that they deserve the best education possible, an education that can help them find purpose and meaning and be excited about going back out there and learning, then you get good schools. There's a lot of other stuff that has to happen, instruction, technology, etc. But basically, this is so much about beliefs. But for so long, what's happened is we throw away young kids. We throw away mostly Black and brown kids. And once we throw them away, we just forget about them. They just pile up in these youth facilities and they just cycle through. There's no parents out there. There's no parent advocacy. I mean, I have kids who are in 10th grade, and if the school just decides to shut down for a few days, I call up. I don't just say, oh, so there's no advocacy. There's no transparency. But so, we'll circle back on a whole bunch of other sort of more technical things about how these schools are structured and the challenges. But part of it is, if there are good people inside that fully and truly want these kids to get a great education, it can happen. There's a lot of challenges, but it can happen and it can work. But to the extent that either the teachers or the school leadership or the facility institution leadership doesn't see these kids as worthy, then the schools become bad, and it can be really disgraceful.
Brittany, how about you? What was your experience like when you were working in the detention center facilities, and what did you think some of the issues were?
So, Oakdale was the first place I ever worked when I graduated. I literally graduated, and the next day I drove back up to DC and started working. So it was a great place to just kind of get my feet wet in the world of education in DC. And as you stated, Alex, just the connections that we made with each other. And I think what David has said rings true. And I think that's partially why we were able to make those connections, because we all had a commitment to students making growth in whatever area we ourselves were able to contribute. So socio-emotionally, academically, just overall, we were all very much committed to seeing the students develop. And for me, an area that became important was literacy. And I remember starting off and saying I wanted to be a social studies teacher. But I just found that a lot of the young people had trouble accessing the grade level texts that they were being asked to read. And then I switched over to English. I remember I had an English lead teacher that I work with who also gave me a great foundation. But the more I worked on that side, the more I just got a sense of the need for strong literacy instruction. There were several students who had IEPs. I think the majority were for more of like a emotional or behavioral disability, but you did have those who had strong literacy needs as well. And that's what's kind of sparked me to go into the direction that I went into, because I just saw that quality literacy instruction is necessary everywhere, but particularly for our youth who are incarcerated. So.
That was one of the major things that I saw too, that a lot of the students, well, all of the students that were in my class had an IEP. And so you would assume that if the majority of the students have IEPs, then there would be supports. There would be more supports around those students because they had IEPs. The students that we had in our school were privileged enough to actually have us trying to really funnel in all these resources. And it was a program that was being created. But I'm sure that our program was very much so unique in the way it was, as opposed to other facilities, especially since what I've read. Wendall, what has been your experience, out of curiosity?
Well, I would say that the experience I've had, I've noticed that a lot of programs have been grossly underfunded. We have problems with students who have literacy issues, but they don't have usually special ed teachers or teachers that specialize in literacy, and they're working with the students. From my experience. But my experience also has been a gamut. I've seen people that was extremely low, and I've seen people that was brilliant that has walked in my classroom that just blew my socks off when I saw their test scores. And it was just like, well, why are you here? But one thing I've noticed to be consistent is that everybody understands that education is important. A lot of people just don't understand how important education is. So once we be able to get the student in and get them to understand how important education is, then I start to see the transformation. One thing that I've always did as a teacher in a correctional facility, the first thing that I did when they would bring a student in is I would make them write about themselves. So the first day, they have 2 pages of paper. I want you to write about yourself. Tell me about yourself. And then I would give them my biography, and I'll give it to them and say, hey, here you are. This is who I am. I'm about to read about you. So that opens the door, so it becomes more personal interaction with each other, because now they know more about me, and I now know more about them. I'm just not talking to them. And then I ask them, what is it that you want to hear? Because people really never have the conversation with the stakeholders. The stakeholders at the table are the students. And in order for us to, for my personal opinion, in order for us to effectively engage the stakeholders at the table, we have to ask them what it is that they want. And one thing that I saw that helped me a lot in I'm getting some feedback. Are you all getting feedback too?
Okay.
So can everybody take their speakers off, their microphones off? Maybe that might help. Is that better now? Okay. So one thing that I noticed that helped me a lot in my classroom was they always wanted to learn about business. They wanted to learn about money. They wanted to be entrepreneurs. So I would do this thing where 2-3 weeks straight, we would do academic work. That third week, fourth week, we would do business work. I would teach them how to trade stocks. I would teach them how to do business plans. I would teach them all the stuff that they felt like they needed to know in order to make it into the real world. And they just, for some reason, they felt like the academic work wasn't going to take them in the real world, even though I honestly feel like it would, but they just didn't get to that place yet. In order for me to get to that place, I always just dangle the carrot, like, okay, just work with me for these 3 weeks solid. And when we get to that fourth week, I'm gonna teach you all how to trade stocks. I used to do something called the stock boot camp. And we would get the newspapers, we'll look at stocks, we'll talk about what it means to do long, short, all that type of stuff, because I got my MBA in finance. So that's something that I've always wanted to do. And I was able to pass that knowledge on to them. And when I passed them on knowledge that they thought was important, I saw it transcend into other areas in the classroom. So when I was like, okay, well, come on, this is what we're going to do, and I dangled that carrot in front of them, they would do everything else for those 2 or 3 weeks because they knew that it was something to come along that they wanted to do. And I will always tell them that it's all about risk management. This is what we're going to do. If you sell drugs, you go to jail, but you could trade stocks and it's legal. It's a risk. You can sell drugs, you can end up killed. But if you learn how to trade stocks, you're in front of your computer and you're safe. You can sell drugs, you'll go to jail. But you can trade stocks. As long as you're not doing inside trading, you won't go to jail. It's a risk. You just have to be careful of the type of risk that you're going to take. Why take this risky risk where you can end up your life or you being in prison for the rest of your life when you can actually be here making money behind the computer? So that's some of the things that I would teach them. And they will always say, well, how can we do this? And I've never done it before. I was like, if you can run off the statistics of basketball players and basketball teams, you can run off the statistics of stocks, because just replace those players with individual stocks and you got it. And that's how I was able to get them to the place that they needed to be.
So then let me ask you a question. I mean, because when I was reading, it was saying that you're saying these schools are grossly underfunded, right?
Well, for the program
so I'm asking,
like, was grossly underfunded.
Okay, so I mean, I'm wondering, do most school districts, does the superintendent govern, and I guess this is more to Wendall and David, does the school district govern the schools that are inside of these facilities, or is there a separate organization within government that manages the funding and the oversight of these types of schools?
Well, here in Ohio, in Cleveland, Ohio, I can just speak for Cleveland. It's kind of a level of both. CMSD does have some schools in the juvenile facilities, but they also have independent ran schools that's in some of the juvenile facilities as well. So I guess it just depends on which facility we're talking about. So that comes along with other issues. So when I first started working in juvenile jail, having it being a public school inside of it was relatively new. I want to say as I was transitioning, that was when they started bringing the public school in. And even then, it was like an online program where they had to log in, they had computers, they were doing stuff online. They had a teacher that was in the classroom helping facilitate. But it's just a luck of a draw. Sometimes it's a public school, and sometimes it's an organization that come in to educate the students.
How about you, David?
It's kind of a hodgepodge, but in the youth setting, although people use the words interchangeably, one way to think about it is there's pretrial detention centers, which is akin to like a jail in the adult system, and then there's there's post-adjudication systems, which is more like a prison in the adult system. So the pretrial detention centers, every city has pretrial detention centers. That's not what New Beginnings was, but here in DC, it's the YSC, right? Every Milwaukee, Cleveland, every Baltimore, everybody's got a local detention center. And all over the country, there's just hundreds of these scattered around in sort of small rural counties as well. Those detention centers are almost always run by the local school the city or the county. The schools inside of them are almost always run by the local school district, or they contract out. Then a young person goes to trial and they're adjudicated delinquent, and they go to the state facility. At the state facility, it's about a 50-50 draw. About half of the state facilities have their own education division. The Indiana Department of Youth Corrections runs those facilities. They have a couple hundred teachers, and those teachers run the schools inside of their facilities. And that's how it is in Missouri. That's how it is in Texas. That's how it is in Louisiana. The Louisiana Office of Juvenile Justice has 3 big facilities. They have security guards, et cetera, and they also have a cohort of teachers. In about the other half of the post-adjudication world, local school districts provide it, or they contract it out. So it's a real mishmash. And to go back, when the school districts run it, the school districts should be using and should have access to the same financial resources and should be using the same per pupil funding formulas that the rest of the schools in the district and the state get, if that makes sense. If the state agency runs it and the state agency just has their own education division, sometimes they don't even pull in education dollars. They just budget it out of their operating dollars, and people don't really know where the money comes from.
Okay, so let me just do this really quickly because Hilderbrand just came back in, and so I want to definitely introduce him and bring him into this conversation. And so I'm definitely going to do that. So hold on one second. I'm going to add Hilderbrand, and I want to introduce Hilderbrand. So give me 2 seconds, Wendall, David, and Brittany, because he is going to add something to this conversation as we segue into the whole conversation about curriculum, okay? And so let me just introduce him. And so sorry, Hilderbrand, what happened was we crashed at the beginning, and so we lost some people, and so they've been coming back in, all right? So Hilderbrand, everybody, is Mr. Hilderbrand Pelzer III. Is an award-winning educator with 3 decades of wide-ranging experience, having served as an assistant regional superintendent, a principal, an assistant principal, and a teacher. Pelzer is highly familiar with the interconnected pathway of educational problems and solutions from the classroom to the district level. As the author of Unlocking Potential, Organizing a School Inside a Prison, Pelzer has earned a national reputation for his achievements in expanding opportunities in highly challenging schools and educational environments. His passion for education and disadvantaged youth has equipped him to meet the needs of the most underserved students, demonstrated in his achievement of numerous national and local awards. All right. So it's my pleasure to have you on. I'm so sorry for what happened and the disconnection. Hopefully the conversation will get better in a moment. OK, so it was already good, but yeah, hopefully it'll get better for you. All right. So I want to bring in the space of why aren't the schools coordinating the curriculums with the public schools, and why does it seem to be that the public schools already, we feel like, get the leftovers, but then the juvenile justice system is just getting the worst. And so why isn't there like a coordinated thing? I even remember when I was working in the juvenile justice system, they weren't separated by levels and grades. We just kind of had groups together that were by their units that all had to learn in the classroom. And you as a teacher had to kind of figure out where was a middle ground for all the students, but they were so vast in space. So I was doing math when I was there, and there were students that had struggles with adding and subtracting and doing division. And some kids were good in algebra. And so trying to figure out a way to keep them all engaged while teaching them math was a very difficult issue. Why do you think the curriculum is not as good? Or what do you think that we should be working on as far as curriculum is concerned in the schools? And I'll go ahead and toss this to Hilderbrand so he can kind of talk about his experience, okay? You're on mute, Hilderbrand.
Thank you. I apologize. And hello again, Alex, and to everyone. And while I was waiting in the back, I so appreciated what David was speaking about, because it just reminded me so much of the work that I was a part of in the side of the Philadelphia prison system. But curriculum and bringing education to incarcerated youth is certainly a disconnect. And mostly it's because they are the forgotten kids. Even school districts, leaders and superintendents included, are not focused on the incarcerated youth. And so far, it's important that principals and leaders inside of these facilities really advocate for those programs and advocate and leverage the resources that the district has for traditional schools so that those resources are brought into the facilities. That includes professional development for teachers. That includes the curriculum. That includes supports around special education. And all of the things that you would get in a traditional school is not happening in schools with incarcerated youth. And so when you think about the training that the teachers have and how we deliver coherent instruction, we have to look at some models that are could be designed inside of those facilities, inside of those secure facilities. And so how do you deliver your curriculum, your reading, your math to folks on the housing units, folks in the school setting, folks in segregated populations, making certain that you're aligning it with their academic needs, not necessarily their age, but making certain that you're advocating for that day in and day out, every day, because they're the forgotten kids.
I recognize that the cool thing about the school that I was in when I was a teenager is that we were a charter school, if I'm correct, David, right? We were a charter school, and so we had a little bit more funding, I guess, than a public school would have. I'm assuming because we had more resources. I mean, once I experienced being at the school in Oak Hill, I was kind of spoiled because there were a lot of resources that we had when we were there, as opposed to when I was helping out at a public school where we kind of came out of pocket for a lot of the things that we tried to do. So, like, what do you think should happen, or how do we put these things at the forefront so that superintendents and principals could focus on these types of situations in schools? What should we be doing as citizens trying to like kind of promote these things in these spaces? And I'll let anybody just kind of toss in what they want to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can just, you go ahead.
I think people need to advocate. I think that, again, like Hilderbrand said, that it's a loss. Like, these people, no one really think about these students. Like, because they're not in the public schools, they're in the jail facilities. And you'd be surprised. Some people may feel like they don't have a right to a good education, but they do. They do have a right to a good education. So I think that you have to start informing people to let them know more about the injustices that's going on with this certain subgroup of people in the correctional facility. Because a lot of people don't know. A lot of people just assume that when you go to jail, your education just stops. A lot of people never really question that part of it. And even think about the basic level of high school. Everybody assumes that everyone has a high school diploma. But that's really not the case. You'll be surprised. There's a lot of people out here without that basic level of education. So I think people just don't think about it because everyone just assumes that everyone has a high school diploma. And I think people just assume that once they go to jail, some people may feel like they don't deserve to have an education. Why spend money on them when you could put the money back into the public schools where people want one and they're going to school every day and quote unquote taking care of business. So I think we just have to educate people and become more advocates for those people because they really are voiceless at this point. Because they're not able to advocate for themselves because they don't know what to truly advocate for.
Right. And the educators inside of those facilities, in collaboration with the correctional staff members, whether they be wardens or commissioners, need to be the key leading voices for that population because they're going inside of these facilities every day to be teachers and principals and school leaders. And so they must advocate with their own school districts, but in general, advocate for that particular population.
Yeah.
Well, David, were you connected to the school district as you were starting this school in Oak Hill? Like, what was your connection as the executive director of this organization to the school district as you were starting the school in Oak Hill?
Well, again, this is an example. All these different state structures are structured differently. But in DC, at what used to be Oak Hill, the DC's Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services ran the facility. That's when young people are adjudicated delinquent, they become their guardian, right? They're in charge of them. And for many, many years, the District of Columbia Public Schools ran the school out at Oak Hill. And they have a memorandum of understanding about expectations. And in this city, which is just kind of odd, the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services paid DCPS to run the school there. And there's like a interagency contract and an exchange by agencies. In many cases, that's not how it works. You have the youth agency, and then you have a school district, and the school district gets per pupil funding, and whatever per pupil funding they get, they are supposed to use it to come provide school. But just to provide an example here, so the actual school inside there, when we came in, we were not a charter. We just had a contract with the district DC Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, because they used to have a contract with the district. They were dissatisfied with the level of performance, so they fought a big political battle with the mayor and said, we're going to put out an RFP and see if anybody wants to come in and run a good school. Under the laws in the District of Columbia, if you convert something from sort of a public entity to something slightly different, you actually have to at least save 10%. What people don't often know is that the school that you all worked at, we ran that school with that level of resources and that level of attention, and ran a school in the transition, and ran a school in the city, a transition school, for 10% less than DCPS charged the district on an annual basis to sit around and give kids workbooks and watch videos. That's because you two cared, and we used the money we had to bring people to bear and to bring resources there. It is true the amount of that contract was more than the average per pupil amount that a kid would get at a regular high school, but it was no more than the District of Columbia Public Schools was getting. It was 10% less. We just delivered more because of this commitment that kids cared, that kids mattered. The reason it was higher, though, was because the agency and Vinnie Schiraldi said, these kids do matter, and we know that to educate them is going to cost more money than a traditional high school, because you can't have 30 kids in a class, et cetera. So again, without getting stuck in the weeds, there's a lot of different funding sources, but one thing, if we go back to this advocacy piece, young people, many states have per pupil funding formulas, like Hilderbrand, knows that have weighted per pupil funding formulas. If you are a school that has kids with, you get extra Title I funding, if you have kids with certain risk factors. And some states have started to adopt formula that make it such that, and then if you're a real small school, oftentimes you get a bump up, right? Because it's expensive to run a small school, not because people are getting paid more. It's just you can't divide the money as much, right? You still have a principal. Well, that principal runs a school for 40 kids, not a school for 500. So it's more expensive per pupil. States acknowledge this, and there's all these funding formulas that try to do this. And some good schools have done better jobs than others, so that, Alex, that small school in a detention center in kind of the middle of nowhere could get the resources it needs. So in Oregon, for example, by state law, every school in a youth facility, the per pupil amount they get is 2 times the state average, because the legislature did some research and said, you know what, given the level of special needs, the transitory nature, the average academic level, they're small, all these things combined, our research says you would need about twice as much money to educate one of those young people well than in a traditional high school. And the Oregon legislature passed that. And it makes a big difference, because now these schools have the resources. They still need the people that believe, but at least the excuse is gone. You have enough money to do a good job. You now have to make the commitment to do it. Why did that law 2 times the multiple get passed? I think it got passed because of of advocacy. See, that's how things work in our country. Someone has to go advocate and say, these kids deserve enough money so that they can have a quality education. That money might be more than, because it's not equal, it's what they need, right? It's not the same amount, and they need a higher per pupil amount for all these reasons. And that's a real anathema to some people, just like Wendall said. But when Wendall says, like, what do you mean? We're not going to spend more money. People used to always say this about my academy. Well, why should we spend more money for a kid that's locked up than we do for a kid in the community? Like, wow, that doesn't make sense. And James, James and I'd like, no, the truth is, the schools in the community need more money too. We, the citizenry, need to make a commitment about the level of needs here. But let's not kid ourselves. Giving a little bit extra money for 40 kids at a time is not taking that much money from a school district with 80,000 kids, right? If you do the math, this is de minimis in the scheme of things. And that's how it would be in a lot of cities, right? Some big city that has 400,000 kids in it, you got 100 kids in a detention center. The fact that they make 2 times the multiple is de minimis to the cost of running the public schools in Chicago. But people don't want to do it because they think these kids don't deserve it. Right. They're bad kids. They don't deserve it. And they deserve less money, if anything. That's what people say. Right. It's hard to, and they don't have parents advocating for them, et cetera.
Right. And if I could add to that, David is exactly right. The funding formulas are different across the states. Not only are they different, but even within a state, when the state gives a formula to the school district then budgets with its own formula.
Absolutely.
So the money you receive from the state is one thing, but then the school district's budget processes has another formula that determines how much money schools actually get. But one of the things that we had at the Philadelphia Prisons, we also had that Title I Part D for the neglected and delinquent youth, with this dedicated funds for students in correctional facilities. So that was some funds that other schools wouldn't get because their students weren't incarcerated. And so we utilized those funds to the best of our ability to bring in the resources needed when you go back to the conversation you had earlier about curriculum, professional development, materials, and all of those type of things. So how you use that money, how you leverage that money, how you advocate for that money, those monies is so important for this particular population.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that, oh, go ahead, Brittany. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just want to piggyback off of what Hilderbrand just stated about professional development and training. And I would say, again, I know Hilderbrand, you might not have heard me say this, but my desire to teach literacy in itself came from teaching at Oak Hill Youth Detention Center. And so I just recognize the importance of having strong literacy instruction. Arguably, it's more important in the juvenile detention centers than in your schools in the city or in the community. Mm-hmm. And so I would really urge, I think what's really important is using that funding for the professional development and the training, because I believe that it's everybody's job to teach students how to read. Mm-hmm. That's from the word decoding, phonics, word reading level on up to comprehension and being a critical reader. And, students have to read in every class that they take. So again, we are all responsible. And that's a hard sell even in the schools and in the city. So, that when you talk about advocacy, that's an area that's really important to me, to advocate that these teachers, all teachers, receive strong literacy training so that we can give the students the best.
Yeah, it's important, definitely in the I apologize, Wendall. It's definitely important in the correctional setting because we see students coming below third grade levels, but it's also important in those early grades, right? Because when we talk about the school to prison pipeline, a lot of times we focus on the behavior, the discipline, the suspension, but all of that is a result of frustration, falling out of love with school, kids finding other things to do, and they go down this pathway to prison. But it's ultimately comes back to literacy. It ultimately comes back to the ability to have great reasoning skills and thinking skills that learning how to read can help them navigate those necessities.
So I would say that when I started off teaching, one of the things about professional development, I walked into a classroom, a student can read. And I'm like, you don't know where to write your name at? You like literally, and I had to go back to school and take classes on literacy just because I wasn't a literacy teacher. I didn't know how to teach somebody. I didn't know phonics. I didn't know decoding. I didn't know any of that.
Right.
So in order to make myself a better teacher, I had to then go back to school and learn what literacy is and how do you teach this to people. Mm-hmm. And with the prison, the pipeline, one thing I would like to make a point of it is there is a prison, the pipeline. A lot of people don't believe it. But I also want to make sure people understand that when you put stuff in place, especially in the pre-K 6 level or pre-K 8 in the building, you have to be careful because not only is there a prison in the pipeline, but you also have to put the right stuff in place to help support it. And why I say that is because I was a K-8 principal and I became a high school principal. I taught in juvenile systems before. So the principal prior to me, when I walked into this K-8 building, She believed in a prisoner pipeline. She didn't suspend kids. She didn't do anything. But what she did not do is have the right programming in place to help support the kids. So a middle school kid would get into a fight. One day in the kindergarten room, the other one day in the pre-K room. That was their discipline. To her, she was teaching them that you're teaching them how to, you're acting like a child, so I'm gonna put you into a child classroom. That's what the discipline that I had when they would fight. I walked into a building where there was no discipline. They were used to getting the smack on the wrist because she believed in the prisoner pipeline, and I believe in it too. Also making sure that they give the teachers and the administration the support that they need in order to put those programming in the school. It's not just not suspending a kid, it's also having substantive programming within that building to help support those kids and change the behavior. So imagine, Hilderbrand, I know you've been a principal before, imagine going into a building where that was the discipline for fighting for a year and a half. Imagine what I walked into. Just imagine what I want. Now, I never talk bad about anybody as a principal because no one goes into that position and says that I want to do a bad job. Right. No one goes in that position and says that. But I understand where she's coming from. It is the prison pipeline, and she did not want to suspend kids. Right. But also, it's not just not suspending the kids, also having the right programming in place to help change those behaviors. Absolutely. So I just want to make sure I throw that out there too, because listen, when I tell you I walked into a building that the first week I probably got cussed out about 20 times by parents. Because I'm like, oh no, we're not doing this. This is not a school. But they wasn't used to any type of discipline. Again, you fight, if you get one day in the kindergarten room, the other one get one day in the pre-K room. Nah, we not doing that.
Yeah.
So that I just want to kind of jump in because now I'm a little bit curious because I mean we've had conversations surrounding the learning and how the kids need to learn, but what is the role of the parents? I mean, and I think. Is this one of the reasons why this issue is not being advocated for? I mean, I think somebody kind of hit on that a little bit because I remember when I was working, we never had interaction with the parents. And most of the times, kids who don't do that well in school usually have a lot less parent involvement. And I could be wrong or right. And so because there's not that much parent involvement kind of pushing the conversation around their children engaged in education within a facility, I mean, and I think that might be the reason why a lot of these kids go forgotten most of the time because the people who are advocating for school reform and education are kids who are usually either going to the public school system or the charter schools or the private school outside of the juvenile justice system. So like, I mean, what type of language or how do you talk to somebody to tell them that this is an issue that they should be concerned about? So that they could become active in advocating for these types of issues.
So I know with me, when I used to have students that would have major issues, when I brought their parents in, sometimes as soon as their parents walked in, you automatically know what the issue was as soon as the parent walked into the building. And you don't even want to put it on the parent like that, but how I used to try to frame the conversation with my teachers. When I used to hire, I used to tell my teachers, look, we're mothers, we're fathers, we're uncles, we're barrier breakers. If you're coming to just be an instructional teacher, I'm not the principal for you, and this is not the school. We're everything to these kids. We may not get the parental involvement that we want and that we need. Throw that to the side. We still have to do our job, and we still have to advocate. So that's how I started to change the conversation with my staff. I told them, we're not teachers. We're barrier breakers. We're mothers, we're fathers, we're advocates. We're everything to these kids. And we can keep leaning on saying that parents aren't coming and they're not returning phone calls. It is what it is at this point. This is depending on where you work at, that could be the reality of our building. But we have to transcend that. All we can do is continue to reach out to our parents, continue to engage our parents as much as we can. But I would never have parents come in when there was parent-teacher conferences to come pick up report cards. So I started doing this thing where I called it the gotcha moment. Everybody want to come see their kids do presentations. Everybody want to see their kids come sing in the choir. Everybody want to see those type of Halloween parties. Everybody and their mother were coming through the building with the uniform, with the costumes on and everything. So what I would do is, I got you. You walking in the building now, we're doing parent-teacher conferences and you didn't know it. You thought you was coming in here for this Halloween party. Yeah, we have a Halloween party, but you need to go talk to your kid teacher first. Because there's some things going on and you need to address some of these issues that's going on so we can work collaboratively together about what's going on. I had parents that I would call, they would forward me to the voicemail. They just would not take they would not participate in their kids' education for some reason. And again, it goes back to parents understanding education is important. I just think some people just don't understand how important it is. They put other things above their kids' education, and they think it's up to the school to educate their kid, and they shouldn't have to do anything part of it. So how I always worked out it when I did my hiring, I would tell my teachers, if you're coming here to just be a teacher, this is not the place for you. We're mothers, we're fathers, we're barrier breakers, we're everything. And sometimes you might have to go knock on that kid door. So if you're not willing to do all that, then I just tell my friend, this is not the time, this is not the place for you. And when I started having those conversations, when I started hiring, I saw my building do a drastic change where, yes, we wanted the parent interaction, but we didn't need it at that point because we already knew what we were battling. We knew we were the advocates, and we were advocating for our students.
And the collaboration piece is key, as Wendall said. Our parents want to be involved. So parents want to be involved. Sometimes they don't know what questions to ask. Sometimes they see problems at home, say, as Brittany was talking about with reading and literacy, they see their child can't read and they're asking the school for help. So really how the school collaborates with them, brings them into the picture, plans with them, explains the curriculum to them, helps them understand what data and assessments we're using with children so that they can help model at home what they need to be doing for their children is so important. And so how we engage them and how we keep them involved is so important. But as a principal, you're relying on a lot of that work through your teachers. So training up your teachers on how to best communicate and work with their parents around what's happening in their classroom and how to keep those parents involved and what does that environment look like is so important.
I would just say, regarding parents, I am at a very different school. I stated this on another show I did with Alex. I've taught in DCPS. I've taught at a special ed school in DC that's no longer open. GED schools. I even taught at a community college, and the type of student and family that I work with at the school I'm at now is very different from any of those experiences I just named. Parents, not only do they show up to everything, they are constantly reaching out, but it's a different demographic, particularly socioeconomically. And so I think that makes a big difference. You have well-educated parents, parents who do the research. So they come in asking questions about certain reading programs and about certain things that they've researched that they know that their child probably would benefit from. So the students of mine where that is not the case as much, I mean, we have to really go the extra mile to get parents on board. And even when they're not, we are still responsible for serving the child. And like you have to have, so I agree with Wendall, definitely you have to have that mindset that you'll do whatever it is that you are capable of doing to help this child succeed. And when the student sees that you're putting in your all and you're just genuine and you're authentic, they want to perform for you. And in the long run, that's performing for themselves. But, especially with a middle school student, it's about building the connection. So even though parents, very, very important. And again, just working at a school now where parents are 100% involved, I can see that. But that doesn't mean that, I just focus on the kids whose parents are there and then the ones who don't show up. Well, we're going to talk about them and stuff like that. Because that happens. A lot of teachers, they're frustrated. And so I know that we have a bunch of administrators, and just me speaking as a teacher, I know that there's a lot of frustration in just the workload. But that's kind of what we take on. And I think it's about connecting. It's about building with your administrators so that you don't feel like you're swamped and you're overwhelmed and you can't do the work that we're really here to do, but also knowing it's not going to be like you're teaching in Fairfax County. That's the suburbs out here in Virginia. That's where I went to school, right? It's not going to look like that. So you just have to be honest with what you're capable of and what you're willing to do. And if that, like, I like what Wendall said, if you can't kind of step up and meet the challenge, then that is not the school for you. And that doesn't say anything about you as a teacher per se. It just, and it could be a phase in your life. You may have done this work and worked in these tough settings for years, and you just, maybe things change in your life. Maybe you have a family and you're not capable of giving 100% in that particular setting, but you have to know what you're dealing with and what you're up against, and you have to really look at yourself and say, what can I honestly do?
But teachers are not the only ones that get burnt out. Neither administrators get burnt out quickly. My first year, I swore that I would never go back into another school. I swore I would never be a principal. Listen, I swore education off. I said, it just wasn't for me, because I literally was spending 12, 13, 14 hours in the building. They traditionally had two principals. When I got in, they fired the assistant principal, and it was just me running the ship. And I already told you the type of discipline I was dealing with. But one thing also I did that I thought that helped me a lot too was doing PD. I put all my teachers on a bus, and I had a psychologist, and I had a social worker on the bus, and we got on the bus and we went around to the neighborhood so they can see where these kids are coming from. A lot of teachers teach at schools and they don't ride through the neighborhood. They don't know where these kids are coming from. And I had this social worker and a psychologist talking to them about trauma, talking to them about the different neighborhoods and the things that was going on. And I had so many teachers that had tears in their eyes by the time it was like silent by the time we got back to the building. And I think my teachers had trauma because they didn't know, but they needed to know. You need to know where these kids are coming from. And a lot of teachers, they just don't know. And I think once you teach them where these kids are coming from, then I think that you start opening up a lot more to, okay, these kids need more help than what I'm giving. And then you start to get more from them.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I saw an article that just recently came out, and in the article was talking about the leaders of the Black charter schools in this city, and specifically in Philadelphia, were complaining. They were saying that there was some disparities at how the district treated the schools that were run by African-American leaders. And so it just kind of made me think, do you think there's a race component that is connected to this leaving out of the justice system? As I spoke to before, that said the majority of the students that make up the juvenile justice system in the United States are 1, African-American, 2, Native American, and 3, Hispanic. And we know from the historical context of this country, those have been the most marginalized population. And I think the only population that may be more marginalized than African Americans are Native Americans. They have high levels of domestic violence, high levels of drug abuse in their communities. And now I'm seeing that there's high levels of child incarceration in their communities. So, do you think that there's a racial component that's connected and tied to this? And I'm going to toss it back at David, and then I'm going to bring it around to the rest of you all. Is there some sort of a racial component that's tied to this? Because I know we hit at the prison to pipeline piece to it. And I know probably a lot of the students that come out of the juvenile justice system end up graduating to the adult prison system. And so do you think that there's a racial component and that's the reason why a lot of these children are forgotten?
Well, in the entire time I was at Oak Hill New Beginnings, there was not one white kid that ever was adjudicated delinquent and found to have done something serious enough to get sent to Oak Hill or then New Beginnings. And in the last 11, that was for 5 years. And in the 5 years before me and the last 7 or 8 since, the number's been 99% African-American. So there's a huge race component to this from start to finish. At one level, again, we're comfortable. I'm not saying individuals on this call. We as a nation are comfortable and have been comfortable with the notion of having teenage African-American males in bondage. They are enslaved or they are in jail, juvenile detention, or they are in jail. And we are comfortable with that to some degree. And that is easy. And so that's so that's just that. We would never, it's inconceivable that DC would have at times had a couple hundred white kids piled on top of each other out at Oak Hill for the middle years there before Vinnie Schiraldi got out there and we started doing reform. It's, people say, how do you know that? Well, it just would not have been tolerated, that, especially given the nature of the crimes, alleged crimes that young people were committing. Some were very serious, but some were not serious at all, and to get shipped out there for months and months at a time. So there's a huge race component just in our capacity to accept or utilize something like that as a place to house and throw away and disregard black kids, black men, primarily young and old. But then separately, race plays a factor on all the other factors of this too. To your point, more black kids end up in isolated, poor communities, which struggle with resources and challenges, and then they end up in schools. Not every single one of them end up in schools that are more challenging and less resourced. And that then leads to less interest in school because of the curriculum, like Hilderbrand said, and students starting off school with some challenges, like Brittany said, and all that leads to the 8th and 9th and 10th grade being years where young people who were doing quite well just all of a sudden just stop going, get in trouble, and they're in the detention center. So it hits at both the macro level and then every level of like input along the way. Well, that's my take.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think, Hilderbrand?
It's definitely a.
Go ahead, Brittany. If you was going to jump in, go ahead.
No, I actually had a question, so I'm going to let Hilderbrand answer. Do you mind if I ask a question, Alex? Okay.
No, I'm agreeing.
I didn't mind if you asked the question. No, that was me saying I didn't mind.
I wanted. No, I was saying I wanted Hilderbrand to go first, and then I will go. So I'll wait till he says.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'm agreeing. Definitely a racial problem. I mean, the data supports it. Majority of black children are incarcerated. Majority of black children who are incarcerated can't read. When you think about resource allotment, non-black children have access to other type of resources like counseling or psychiatry or other services and therapy, where black children don't have the resources for legal services, bail, whatever the case may be, and they are in prison. And so this has been not anything new. It's long-standing. There's study after study that speaks to it, and it's still happening. And so it definitely is a racial component to it.
Just before you go, Brittany, let me just do this because I know that David has to leave. And so what I try to do before at the end that I let you say something positive to everybody to kind of uplift it, because I usually talk about heavy topics, and then tell people how they can follow your work or support the work that you're doing.
Sure. Well, thanks. And I'm sorry to hop off, everybody. Again, amidst of all these challenges, there are kids that get stuck in these facilities. They're all incredibly deserving, and they produce incredible pieces of writing and of art and music and math if they get the right teachers around them and the right chance to shine. And one of our jobs is for kids who have traditionally failed at and been failed by, it's ironic, but fine. When they go to school in the detention center, this should be their big chance. Help them be successful. Help them do something they enjoy. Help them feel like they can be a success in school. Help prepare them so they get out. Like they should not have been locked up, but they had 10 good days at school. Or they had 1 good day at school, or they had 90 good days at school. And that helps launch them. And they leave school as a student, as a scholar. And it's a different framework. So, if you go to Break Free on Facebook, you'll see a few weeks ago we posted 5 songs that won a nationwide song contest that we sponsor around the country, and there's a playlist there, and they're just totally beautiful, creative songs. And you might think they come from young people who are detained when you listen to the words, but if you listen to just the quality of music and the depth of understanding and just how beautiful stories are, you would be like, wow, that is right. Wow, that's what these kids can produce. So Alex, Brittany, it's great seeing you guys again. I'm sorry that I lose track of people a little bit. I get busy, and then I travel and do work. But I love you both, and I'm so glad I got to work with you for that year. And I'm really, really, really glad that you guys did that. And Brittany, I'm going to do better because you only live like a mile from me. So great to meet you all too. Great to meet you both.
No worries. Thank you, David.
All right.
Good to see you, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, David changed my life. That's a whole thing. But yes, to go back to it, the racial disparities. I mean, and that's the thing that I always hit on, because a lot of the people that follow my social media and everything, they tend to be like these Black power, Black focused people. But I think sometimes there are some certain aspects of the Black experience that we just kind of forget in our fights of everything else that's happening around us. And this is one of the most important fights, because these are children, children that society sometimes looks at as adults. So when we're talking about crimes, and a lot of people sometimes try to dismiss this population because they're saying, oh, they're violent, they need to be in these spaces. Most of the children that are locked up in juvenile detention have done nonviolent crimes. And most of the time, those nonviolent crimes come from the fact that, like Hilderbrand was saying before, is because they aren't attaining educationally the way that they want to attain. So they find other avenues, because a lot of times it's embarrassment, or like they're not being entertained in school because teachers have been burnt out, or the administration kind of looks at them in punitive ways. And so they suspend them for days, which is probably not the best idea if you have a student that's already not functioning well academically, and then they do something bad, you suspend them for weeks at a time, and they don't have to like engage or even learn. Like it just kind of perpetuates the problem. Is there a connection? And I'm saying, like, after they leave these detention centers, and let's say that they do well, because one of the things that was most stressful for me was when we saw a student that was doing well in our schools, and we maybe got them back into the community because they were doing well in the facility. When they got back into the communities, they ended up dying. And it was devastating for me. Because it was just like they were doing so well. And one of the things about teaching in a system like this is that the kids there make you work for their love. Like, it's not an easy walk in the park. Most of them are teenagers. They're used to not doing what people tell them to do. They've created this image that they live by. And so when you're trying to teach them, they're highly resistant. So you have to work extra hard as a teacher to gain their affection. But when they leave, when you hear in the news that somebody has shot them. I remember one of the kids, he was shot several times after he left the facility. And I was devastated. What types of things can we do once we're trying to give them a good education to help them when they come back into the communities? And that's the after effect, or try to wrap around them as far as education is concerned. And because I was talking about too, that the system doesn't coordinate with the facilities. So how do we wrap around them with services? And I can let anybody jump in with that.
I want to say something real quick. You made a comment about the Black experience. And I always, whenever I hear somebody say the Black experience, especially we're on this forum right now, I want to make sure everybody understands that the Black experience is just purely being Black in America. That's the Black experience, because some people have this thing that being a Black experience means you have to come from a one-parent household, or you have to grow up in the inner city, or you know what I'm saying? Everybody put this thing of what the Black experience is, but the Black experience is just simply being Black in America. And our experiences sometimes be different. I grew up in a two-parent household. Both of my parents went to college. They told us we were going to college, and we had to go to the college that they went to. But people try to minimize my experience as a Black experience because I didn't grow up in the projects, or I didn't grow up in a one-parent household. So I did want to put that pin there that the Black experience is simply just being Black in America, and the Black experience is just different depending on who you talk to. And I would also say this, that the school that I currently work out right now is basically I was the first Black to work in my building. I never knew what it was to be Black until I walked into this building. I had a student tell me, I'm a racist just like my daddy, and you can go F yourself. And you have to keep your composure because these are your students. But those are the type of things that we faced daily, having that Black experience. So I just want to put that pin, that making sure everybody understands that the Black experience is just simply being Black in America. And that experience may be different. But sometimes people want to minimize other people's experiences because they didn't come up in a one-parent household in the project, or you may be educated and then they feel that you truly didn't have a struggle. Everybody had to struggle just simply being Black in America, especially Black males. We definitely, and females too, because you were considered a double minority, being a female and a woman of color, considered a double minority. So I did just want to put a pin in there about the Black experience and just define it as it's just simply being Black in America. Everybody has that experience if you're a person, but if you're African American in America. Then I will go on to say that one thing that I've noticed that has, so yes, I do think that there are racial injustices when we look at charter schools, but I have a question. You said, are we talking about African American ran charter schools, or we're just talking about African Americans just in charter schools, period? What was the article you were referring to?
This one was referring to African American ran charter schools, but I'm right now I'm kind of focusing on trying to figure out like what type of wraparound programs do you figure are most successful to kind of redirect these students from going back or graduating to grown-up jail.
Okay, so one thing I did, I used to work with 25 different charter schools. I used to work for an attorney. So I used to go to all the different charter school boards, and we had management company ran schools. We had independent schools. We had some that was ran by predominantly Caucasians. We had some that was ran by predominantly African Americans. Now, I love my people, love them to death, but we have to take ownership for the stuff we do. We can't hand out a raggedy product and then be mad and call out racism when people are calling us to the table on our stuff. So, and don't get me wrong, I've definitely seen some raggedy stuff come from other counterparts as well, but we have to make sure that we're delivering a high quality product before we get mad at someone calling us out. I've seen them throw up some trash and then try to make it seem like it was good, and it wasn't. As far as the wraparound programs, I think we have to realize that education is not the same education that we had 15, 20 years ago. It's different. And every type of school does not work for every type of student. Some students just do well in small environments. And if this student did well in a small environment in the criminal justice system, then when they get out, maybe they need to find a school that mimics that small environment. Maybe going to a school that has 3,000 kids is not going to work for that student because they'll get lost in the sauce. So I would say that you have to find the best education that fits you. And that's when it becomes very individualized. You just can't say, oh, I left here, so now I'm about to go back to this public school. Well, if you knew the public school wasn't working for you, then that may not be the school for you. You need to dig down deeper and find a school that's truly going to work for you and allow you to be the person that you are, and is going to deliver the results that you need as a student.
Mm-hmm. And so definitely a step down from a transitional program where it allows the student to have that step down where they get the resources that they didn't have when they went to jail. They definitely get those resources when they're coming out, and they're not just thrown back into the traditional setting. You may not be able to control the home that they're returning to, but you definitely can control the step down and the resources, the wraparound services that they get when they come out of a facility to help them ease back into normalcy, or ease back into education, ease back into a small setting, ease back into personalized learning, ease back into a work training if necessary, ease back into therapeutic services and other services that they may need, that they may have received in a correctional setting, but now that they're returning, those services continue to wrap around them and take care of them as they make their way into the wider society.
I would say, as far as wraparound services, I think about all of the electives and the extracurricular activities that students had an opportunity to partake in at Oak Hill. So they had their core classes, but then they had, like, I did a creative writing class. I don't know if you remember that, Alex. We did the creative writing class, and they wrote poetry, drew, made beautiful art, and we made a literary magazine. There was a wood shop class. There was a gardening class. There was a media advocacy, a debate class. I mean, there were just so many different things for the young people to get into. And I remember when we, a music class too. We had a little go-go band. I mean, it was everything, yeah. And they were heavily invested. That was part of the, like, those relationships, because now we're sharing things that we really love with them, and they're starting to find their own within these different activities. So I remember, Alex didn't talk about this part, but we some of the people from the detention center, about 4 of us came together and we started a nonprofit. And our goal was to provide some of those extracurricular elective type activities on the outside. And now we were very young and idealistic, so we did as much as we could back then, and we kind of all went and did our own thing after that. But I mean, I think the notion that we had was beautiful, and that we had already built these connections with young people, and we knew what we knew DC kids, and so we wanted to build something for them. And I think that's key. In addition to therapeutic services, in addition to the educational setting, I think just giving them something to do that they're really going to enjoy, and that they can, it's almost like build life skills. You can, you never know where you go with a woodworking background. You never know what you can do if you learn how to use electronic equipment to make music and things of that nature. Or you might be interested in law. You might be interested because you, as a young person yourself, have a very intimate relationship with the law, being incarcerated. And so we have a very strong debate program. I don't know if you guys have an urban debate league in your respective cities, but they're all over the nation. And we actually had a debate team while we were at Oak Hill. And when they came out, some of them continued to debate. And even in Baltimore, we had students who came out of the detention center, debated, did extremely well. And so, these are activities that could be life-changing for young people. So that's what I think wraparound services should look like, in addition to what's already been said.
Mm-hmm. And the same, Alex, the same is, there are some young people who had the opportunity to return home. But in places like the Philadelphia prison system, where those juveniles are being tried as adults, and most of them are going to state correctional institutions, there's also a conversation about what transition looks like there, right? And so, how do you think about continuing your education, continue to be involved in positive programs at the state correctional level, right, as they were in the county level? Right. So that transition, that conversation is something a lot of young people don't have the opportunity to have, because they don't have people. They're basically by themselves. So they don't have anybody to tell them what it's going to be like in a state correctional facility. I used to always tell young people, find somebody that's like me. Right. That principal, that school leader, folks who are, doing, as Brittany said, various programmatic things in these facilities, and get involved with those curriculums as well.
I just want to say thank you all. I don't want to keep y'all on for too much longer, and hopefully we can do another conversation like this, because I feel like this is a very nuanced conversation, and because of the technical difficulties that we had, and then trying to cram everything into this space, it was a lot. So hopefully I'll bring you all back. I think that this is a conversation around education that should continue on, specifically the types of curriculum that we think should be offered inside these types of facilities. What type of training techniques or teaching techniques should we be using with students who have not found learning entertaining in the school systems they may be in, and some of those types of tactics. But what I want to do is kind of refocus the conversation, because we got to end. And so what I want to do is give you all the opportunity to kind of promote some of the things that you're doing, because y'all are doing amazing things. I am quite humbled and thankful that you all decided to be on my show. So thank you all so much for saying yes. So I'm going to leave you with 2 things to do for me before you leave. It's just to leave everybody with something positive that you think is important, especially during these pandemic times. I can only imagine what's going on inside these detention centers during this pandemic, and even as far as education is concerned. But leave everybody with a positive message, and how they can follow you or support all the work that you're doing. And I always try to be a gentleman, because that's just the way that I was raised. So I'll go ahead and let Brittany go first, and then I'll let you go next, Wendall, and then Hilderbrand, and then I'll go and close this thing out. So I always say, give me 3 points and a closing. because we are at the end of our day. And so I know sometimes when you give speakers a mic, they tend to go on. So just give the Saints 3 points in the closing, and we'll be on out of here and let them go on home. Okay. So go ahead on, Brittany, and then Wendall, and then Hilderbrand.
All right. So, Alex, thank you for bringing me on again. I sincerely appreciate you for this. Wendall and Hilderbrand, it was very, very nice to have to be on here with you and with David. So thank you for that. And my final note, read good books and try to encourage young people to read good books as well. Like, I don't believe that there are reluctant readers per se. I just think that there are young people who just haven't found like their book. So that's one thing I like to push and encourage. To follow me, as I said earlier, I have a brand and a book that I'm publishing. It's called Etymology Rules. And this first book is one in a series. It's called Back to Basics. And it actually is designed for teachers to build their orthographic knowledge so that they learn about phonemes, graphemes, about word parts, just so that they can be word connoisseurs and help their students develop word consciousness.
Okay, well, the two things I would leave is saying thank you so much for having me on the panel. It was great being around some giants. First thing I will say is one thing I tell my teachers is called inclusive excellence. And a lot of people always go, what do you mean inclusive excellence? We have to be more inclusive in our curriculum. Meaning that, like you said, find something that the students want to read. And I'm just going to throw up an example. Maybe they don't want to read Uncle Tom's Cabin. I don't think they still teach that in the school, but maybe they don't want to read that. Maybe they might want to read a book by Sister Soldier. Maybe that might be what gets them to read. So we have to be more inclusive and more intentional in the curriculum and things that we're giving our students. So we have to make sure that's inclusive. So I like to call that inclusive excellence. We don't have to read everything that they claim we need to read. We can find other things that still hit those certain points that we need to teach. Be more inclusive. Second thing is project-based learning. A lot of our students are tired. They don't want to sit there and open up a book and read 15 pages and then regurgitate and do this again. Our kids are used to being up, watching video games, things flashing. They need to be engaged. And engagement through project-based learning, I have seen, has done a lot for the buildings I have worked in and was able to lead. So I think inclusive excellence and also bringing in a lot of project-based stuff where the students can work with their hands and do things. I think that's when you start to see their transition and the students and the things that they are willing to do and bring to the school. In closing, I would just say that don't give up. They need us, and we're the only ones that's here that's going to do the fight. And we know that if we leave it to other people, they may not care as much as we care. So all I can say is just please don't give up the fight. Continue to fight. It's going to get hard, but you know what? That's what we're here for. No, anything in life worth having is worth working hard for, and we have to work hard for them because nobody else is going to advocate and work hard for them like we will. So just don't give up the fight.
Yeah, definitely don't give up the fight. Wendall hit on it earlier when he talked about the school to prison pipeline is real, and it's a real thing. Children are going to jail, and there are a lot of contributing factors to why they're going to jail. But one, most importantly, which would be my first point, is literacy. We have to get literacy and reading instruction right. We need to support teachers who struggle with teaching reading and help build their capacities. Brittany just mentioned that she has a book coming out. It sounds like something that teachers need to have in their hands. And so literacy is so important because many of our children, when you look at the data and just if you have the experience with incarcerated youth, you see that literacy is the common theme in their life, being unable to read, write, relationships between letters and sounds and all those things. But two, incarcerated youth, as I said, is a forgotten population, but they have so much value to not only the relationships you can have with them and learn from them, but they also tell us what's wrong with public education. They also tell us what's wrong with student-teacher relationships. They also tell us what's wrong with literacy if you have these experiences with them. So they can also inform professional learning. And then one of the things that I've been able to do and continue to try to do is just to keep the connection between literacy, low-level literacy, and incarceration out there and keeping this kind of conversation going on, not only on shows like yours, Alex, and I so appreciate you inviting me, but just so that other people see the interconnectedness between low-level reading and literacy and incarceration. And so I just want folks to just not forget about incarcerated youth. Their education is important, and we just have to do more for them.
I'm sorry. And let me just say, how do they follow you? And I'll toss it back at Wendall after you. How do they follow you and stay connected to the work you're doing? Because I know that, Wendall, your board is an elected school board. So, I mean, like you people, it's always good for people to donate to campaigns. And I know, Hilderbrand, you have a book.
Yeah.
And so I think it's always good for people to purchase books.
Yeah.
So how do people follow your work and support what you're doing? And I can just toss it back at you, Hilderbrand, and we'll circle back at Wendall.
Absolutely. So thank you again. So my Twitter, HP3 Potential, HP3 Potential, Instagram, Hilderbrand Pelzer 3. I also have a website, www.hilderbrandpelzer3.com. I encourage folks to visit and learn more about me and the work that I do. And the book, Unlocking Potential, Organizing a School Inside a Prison. The backdrop is the Philadelphia prison system. It's not a crime book, it's an education book. It speaks to how we were able to create a quality learning environment inside of an adult secured facility with all of the challenges that such a facility could have. And so I encourage folks, also my Facebook page, Unlocking Potential Hilderbrand or Hilderbrand Pelzer 3. Please reach out to me.
So reaching out to me is a bit difficult because I'm writing a dissertation. And so I kind of took all my social media away because I said I was spending too much time on social media and I need to get this dissertation written. So when I'm doing my dissertation, you'll be able to find me just by searching Wendall Garth. If you ever want to chime into any of the board meetings, they're online on Zoom. It's the Maple Heights City School Board out of Ohio. I am the vice president of the board. So again, like I know I'm probably the only one that don't have a lot of social media. That's because I'm just trying to get done with this dissertation. And it is a monster. So I'm just trying to finish it. And hopefully I just submitted chapter 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going by May, I'll have chapter 4 and 5 done. So we'll look for me in May.
Absolutely.
I absolutely understand the school struggle. I graduate in 2 weeks. So I'll be graduating too. So I'm right there with you, man. I just want to say thank you all so much for being on my show. And we will definitely hope that everybody follows your social media. I'm going to be following your careers. And I'm going to be looking at your book. I mean, I definitely need to get that. And so thank y'all so much. I will talk to you soon. And I'm going to do my closeout thing. Okay. All right. Good night. And so, y'all, I just want to say that during these times, we really got to make sure that we're looking out for everybody. We are going through a pandemic right now. And I can only imagine we're seeing outbreaks happening in senior homes. We're seeing outbreaks happening in prison facilities. And a lot of times we forget about the youth that are locked up. So keep them in your prayers. Also, we need to be advocating for them too, because they're children. I think sometimes we forget that they are children. They are young people. They are under the age of 18. Most of them usually are. Some of them last beyond 18 in some of these facilities, but for the most part, they're usually 18 and under. And they are a population that, like they said before, are usually forgotten. I think that we really need to make sure that we look into those spaces and advocate for them as much as we can, or even look for organizations that do wraparound programs for them. I mean, this organization changed my life. If I would have never gone into Freedom Schools, if I would have never went into my Angela schools, if I would have never met people that came out of these programs, I would not be doing the work and the advocacy that I do today. I would not be talking to you on this show. I would not be trying to bring up topics. This organization, these young people changed my life. And it was great to see them go off to college, some of them leaving the facility. It was great to see them go back into high school and the communities. I remember when I went to UDC, I ran into one of the young people that I was teaching in the facility, and he was at UDC with me. So like there are great young people there, and they're so talented. Like they would surprise the mess out of you, the artwork that came out of it, the music that we were able to create with each other, like all the great things, the debate. They are brilliant, talented young people that just need another chance most of the time, or need somebody to take notice. And so I just kind of, that's my call to action for you tonight. Go on ahead and look into the juvenile system in your area, see how you can get involved in trying to help the young people that are coming out, so we can use those same services to wrap around them and to give them resources. Even if it's donating a book. We did a thing where they were donating bricks to help build a project that we had. Find a way to get involved in these spaces because they're children too, and they need your support, especially during a time of pandemic. Also want to say thank you all so much for following my show. You can follow me. All the shows are uploaded to Talks with Alex on YouTube. So after this show, you can go to YouTube and you can see this show. It's been recorded. You can follow my page, Alex Deering. You can follow me on Instagram. It's j.alex.deering. I'm sorry. My Twitter is Deering_Alex. And you can always follow me on LinkedIn or you can follow me on Facebook. Please reach out to me. This show was an idea of somebody who just sent me an idea and I was able to pull this together. So if you have ideas about a show, I know somebody else sent me an idea about a healthcare show. So we're going to do a show about healthcare. So just reach out to me if you have any ideas on things that you want or people that you would like to see on my show. Hilderbrand came on because somebody said that they saw him and I invited him and he so graciously came on. So make sure you all, if you want to be involved, or if there's something that you would like me to talk about or somebody that you would like me to bring on as a guest, just reach out to me and I'll definitely invite them. All right. I love you. Please stay safe during this holiday season. This is the time where people get depressed. A lot of y'all can't go home. Please stay safe. Reach out to somebody that you haven't talked to in a while. Please reach out to a friend. A lot of people are losing family members. All right. So please reach out to somebody, talk to them, virtually hug them, virtually love on them. And please stay safe in this pandemic. All right. I'll talk to you another time. Thank you for following me and watching Talks with Alex. And I'll see you next week at 8.